Cool. So welcome everybody. The three showed up so far, but and all you who are hopefully watching this at home after the fact. Um, let's start with a bow. And so just remembering when we bow, I just heard a teaching on the bow, the Naropa bow. So I'll just say what I remember. First, we get in touch with a sense of stability and groundedness in our own posture. Maybe take a breath cycle. And then as we look out, and as a sign of respect to each other, and then we also feel into what's happening in our own body and mind. And as we bow, we also touch a sense of generosity. We can bow to each other. So welcome. And let's start, as we always do, with a few minutes of mindfulness. And then we'll get into some discussion. So first, finding, again, stability, remembering that we want the posture to be upright and relaxed. And eyes can be closed or slightly open, gazing downward. Turning the attention inside, perhaps focusing on the breathing, at least initially. Just noticing where the breathing is happening. So perhaps you're feeling the breathing on the nostrils, perhaps in the belly, perhaps in the heart area. Or perhaps you're feeling all of those and more as the breathing, the breath energy is happening. And so we're working in this way, we could say, with a concentration practice, focusing on the breathing as the object of meditation. And then I'd like to invite you to shift at this point to a more of open awareness practice. So this can be eyes open, can be with eyes also or still closed, but just aware of whatever is happening in your body, in your mind. We could say the concentration practice is like a spotlight, and the open awareness practice is more like a floodlight. So just aware of whatever's happening. This can be thoughts, these can be emotional feelings, bodily sensations. You can focus your attention at different objects at different moments in the practice. Okay. So I'd like to start with just, yeah, I guess I'll say what my plan is for this hour that we have. I have this book called which is the Big Book of ACT Metaphors. And I'd like to start with just seeing whatever questions you all have about the material or about, what's going on for you. And we can spend, some time with that. But I've also selected some of these that we can try together. And I think, this is good to just, ACT works with a ton of metaphors that can be super helpful at, working with clients to help understand some ideas about mindfulness. And we can work with some just so you get some kind of felt experience of what that's like. But yeah, so why don't we start with seeing if there's any questions?
I have a question. I think the one question I have with ACT, and as far as the metaphors and having the client understand that their thoughts don't have to be their lived experience or in some sort of way, I struggle with my own belief system, and as far as in biasy, like how do I know that? I mean, obviously everyone's thoughts are not reality in my world because I go by the contemplative belief system. So how would I know if I'm implementing that not from a biasy from my beliefs and what the client actually needs? I don't know if I'm articulating this correctly.
Let me just see if I can reflect it to see if I understand what you're saying, that you're concerned that working in this way, you might be not working with the client's
Yeah.
because you might be, what's the word? yeah, you might be bringing in your own bias of that thoughts are not reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting concern. I wonder if, do you have someone in mind, Suzanne, or who, because I'm trying to think of what worldview thinks that thoughts are reality. Um,
Just any one. I mean, I'm not,
yeah,
I don't have anyone in mind, but just like,
yeah,
whatever, someone you see at a supermarket, I'm not sure,
yeah, yeah,
or just any random person that might walk into your room that doesn't have a background in Buddhism or contemplative practices.
sure. Yeah, I guess what I'm curious what others think here who are here, but or how they would respond. But I think in some ways mindfulness and therapy are just synonyms. Like any good therapy that you're doing is gonna move you forward in terms of the mindfulness domains, whether or not you're even doing any mindfulness. Because as a therapist, you're going to be if you're effective, you're helping people understand that their thoughts are thoughts, and that and the suffering that they come in with is often lessened with the moving from attachment to those thoughts to holding them more flexibly. And that can be done with psychoanalysis or with humanistic therapy, just active listening and helping people get their thoughts out and reflected to them, can develop self-compassion. Um, so that's kind of what I would think with that. Is maybe I am biased because I'm a therapist also, but I think in some ways it's like um, I guess it's a concern if you're if you're actually teaching meditation and someone's like, I don't want to meditate because that's like against my religion. Clearly that's a concern. But if you're not doing that, and that hasn't been named as a concern by the client, I wouldn't really be so concerned with that. I don't know how my response lands though, or if there's other thoughts.
I guess I have like a additional question to Suzanne's question that kind of is something I think some people run into is believing that their thoughts are their intuition. And so therefore it like makes it real. Like if you're telling a story in your head, some people might believe, well, this is my intuition. I'm just guessing the truth of something. And then they get really caught up in like the emotional pattern. So I guess I'm just like adding to Suzanne's question of like, how do you work with someone and be like, well, intuition is a thing, it's a real thing, but also sometimes it's not intuition, it's just like the stories we create in our head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, how do you hold it lightly? How do you help somebody, coach somebody to not necessarily believe?
Yeah, all their thoughts.
Yeah.
Or all their emotions.
Yeah. Do you have somebody in mind, Marnie?
Well, I mean, I can use myself as an example, but like in the case of like for me, I had a lot of distrust of my ex. And so sometimes when he was acting a certain way, I'd be like, oh, it's because he is, I'm going to be extreme here, but I would be like, he's having an affair with someone. And that's my intuition. My intuition knows that he's having an affair, but like in reality, he wasn't. And
Sure.
so, yeah, like, I guess where would you start with the client to start to uncouple like, okay, yeah, sometimes your intuition tells you what choice to make, but it doesn't necessarily tell you like, just because you think a story in your head doesn't mean it's like it's happening in reality.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's like, and I would just think about, and maybe we can even use that as a starting point to look at some of the metaphors that, because I think some of them are, especially with the diffusion ones, might really address that with looking at an intuition as, yes, that is a data point. But it's a data point,
Yeah.
it's not, because some people would even say it's not a data point, it's just BS. But I would say, no, it is a data point, but it's, but you don't want to, assume then that it's the truth, that it's reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Suzanne, do you want to respond at all? Or should
No,
I?
I think that was that was a really nice segue. I mean, to me, it
Yeah.
also like kind of piles on with like delusion.
Yeah.
Whatever things I make up too, or, when I see this sign, that means I should do this. It's like, that's not have any basis in reality. It's just my thought system.
Right.
Oh, like this song plays, I should buy something. I don't know, the million things we think of as humans.
Right. We're all deluded in our own ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming to see that, hopefully we can wake up a bit that to the delusion. So I think maybe let me do this now. I want to share the Hexaflex diagram that I put on the module. So let me share my screen. Just as, because this book has a bunch of metaphors, and it's organized, which makes a lot of sense in the terms of ACT according to each domain of the hexaflex. All right. So just review, this is the hexaflex, and I always like to just, when we're talking about ACT, the frame of ACT really has two sides. It has the left side on your screen is the mindfulness acceptance side, and the right side is the behavior change or values or committed action. And, they have their own sort of jargon. And like self as context, sometimes it's hard to understand what they mean. I think a phrase that's more accessible to me, at least, is just perspective taking. That's often another phrase that's used in the place of self as context. And that's arguably what all of therapy is about too, or all of meditation is about, is learning to have more perspective on things, especially on yourself, but also on your thoughts, on your emotions, on other folks. I'm learning to have perspective. It's, I've heard it said that another name for wisdom is perspective, a greater perspective. And so diffusion, and again, this might just be review from some of the readings. Diffusion is really focused on thoughts. So diffusing from thoughts. So not being, and this is exactly what we've been talking about. Just being able to step back from your thoughts, seeing them as thoughts. Acceptance has to do with thoughts, but also with all of the emotional and bodily sensation experiences that may be present, just accepting what is present. Very, very related to contact with the present moment. And then again, the bottom, self as context. And these are, I think, a lot of, sometimes I wonder why we need separate categories for these, because I don't understand the discernment between them, but that's just my limited beliefs. But then on the right side, there's really only two for the behavior change. It's values, and this is helping folks identify what their values are. And people can come into treatment with all different, people may not really know what their values are at an explicit level, and they may need your help to identify even one value that they have. And then other folks might come in with a list of 8 values. And I actually had an intake this morning where somebody came in with about 8 really good values. And I was like, okay, great. Like, we can hit the ground running. And then committed action it's really like the behavior change. Like, what's one action you could take towards your values? And so in ACT, we want to help people move towards acceptance so they can free up some energy, and then move towards taking actions towards their values. That's really what we're doing. And so let's start maybe with a diffusion exercise. Or actually, no, this is actually categorized as a self as context or perspective taking exercise. So this is, there's a famous ACT metaphor of the chessboard. Has anybody heard of this one? No, okay. I mean, if you continue studying ACT, you'll come across this a lot. I think this was used by the founder of ACT, what's his name, Stephen Hayes, a lot. But it's basically, it's trying to help people take the perspective that whatever problems they're coming in with are pieces on a chessboard. They're not the chessboard. There's the chessboard, which is bigger than their symptom. It's bigger than their problem with their spouse. It's those are pieces on the chessboard. But if you can help them get in touch with the fact that they, there's a perspective that they can tap into that's wider than the symptom, that can be helpful. So maybe I can just guide you guys through this right now. And this is a guided visualization. So this just takes a few minutes. So make yourself comfortable. Maybe in your meditation posture, where, whatever you need to do, you can turn your screen off if you like. And I'd like you to just imagine a classroom full of students. Some of them are problem students who talk back to the teacher and do things like stick gum under their desk. And they use their phones, sending texts to each other when the teacher isn't looking. Others are quote unquote good students who pay attention, get good grades, and bring apples for the teacher, things like that. And some are just average students who sit at their desks and, kind of fly under the radar. And then at the front of the room, there's a teacher who is evaluating all of the students and is also trying to control the students in terms of behavior, telling them to pipe down, telling them to pay attention, telling them to be good, and doing things like putting gold stars on their papers. And then we can just notice that our thoughts and feelings, even maybe in this moment, are kind of like these students in the classroom. Some thoughts and feelings might be negative, some are positive, and some are more or less neutral. And then there's also a part of you that is like the teacher, who tends to evaluate your thoughts and feelings. Like the teacher, it also tries to control the negative thoughts. It might, get upset at the negative thoughts and tell them to pipe down. And it might also try to reinforce the positive thoughts by giving a gold star. And then the last part of this exercise is just to really notice the classroom where all this is happening. The classroom is very much present to the teacher and the students, but it's also in some ways separate from them. It's present and allowing all of this to happen. It's the context in which all of this is happening. Or put another way, it's the vessel within which all of these experiences are happening. And then as you're ready, you can open your eyes. So so thanks for doing that. What did you guys think of that? What was your experience?
I liked it. I thought it was really creative and like nostalgic, because I obviously haven't sat in a classroom like proper in decades. So it was fun to think about that.
Cool. Yeah, and then what about the like, do you think it was effective for you in getting in touch with that perspective taking or stepping back from experience a bit?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
I definitely noticed that most of my thoughts have like that teacher quality to them. Like I put them in categories and I have this almost like hierarchical system for good thoughts and helpful thoughts, and then the dysfunctional thoughts and the cognitive distortion and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like there's a very judgmental voice in there. And I'm only kind of here because I'm at work with the baby, so apologies.
No worries. Yeah, no worries. I know what that's like. um, cool. Well, why don't we do some others? And I was thinking, if we have time, we can try one from several categories, maybe even do one from each if we're able to. Okay, so let's move from the left side of the hexaflex to the right. So we just did a self as context one. This is a famous, this is like an ACT classic. This is more in the diffusion category. And again, there's a famous metaphor where Stephen Hayes in trainings will just say, he'll invite the audience to say with him, or just, I guess, to listen to him say, milk. And the first time he says it, let me just ask you, what do you think of when I say milk?
Like a cow, probably.
Okay. What do you think of, Marnie?
I thought of, well, I had several thoughts at once, but I had the thought of, like my mom used to buy powdered milk and she
Okay.
would mix it up and then put it in a milk carton. So we thought it was like fresh cow milk, and then we'd drink it and it would be really gross.
That's amazing. Okay. So even that's great. Even with what each of you shared, we can see that that word milk immediately it reveals the nature of our minds, that they immediately associate to different things, whether it's an image of a cow or this memory that connects you to your past with your mom, and then and the powdered milk. So this exercise is intended to divest meaning from the word. You can use different words. This is done with the word pickle or the word milk, or really any word you want to. And that's one of the cool things about ACT is if you really get into this, you can really make it your own and create your own metaphors. And that's really where this book comes from, is the author really invited a lot of people from all over the world to send her their metaphors. Okay. So I want you to say to yourself right now, and maybe, yeah, you can keep your microphones off. Just say the word milk to yourself. And notice what shows up in your mind. Again, maybe it's more of the same. Maybe it's different. And I want you to imagine milk. Imagine smelling it in front of you. What shows up in your mind? And now you might ask yourself, is there a glass of milk right in front of you? And I'm going to venture a guess, probably not. But I wonder if, just with my invitation for you to imagine smelling it, I wonder if anyone got in touch with it a bit, with the smell of it. Maybe even salivation might have been a response. And so the idea here is that this is what a lot of the times, or we might even say always happens with language. In some ways, we create our experience with language. We create the experience of having salivation or having an emotional response to milk by just saying the word milk. Okay. Now I want to try something else with you. Again, you can keep your microphone off if you like. But I want to invite you to say along with me the word milk out loud over and over again. Okay. Milk, 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 milk. And then just notice what's happening for you, even if you were listening or if you were speaking. What happened to the concept of milk?
Can I speak?
Please.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to invite. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just started laughing because it became nonsensical.
Awesome. And that is exactly the point. That pretty much always happens. But we see that in repeating it, for me, I focus on the sounds. I notice at the end there's a hard sound, a K, and it becomes more of a mantra or something like that, rather than the signified or the milk, right? From the language of semiotics, we focus on the signifier as signifier rather than the signified. And so, yeah, so you can see here, this exercise can help us defuse, again, to use the language of ACT, from that thought. And the fusion is really about what happens internally when we nonchalantly and, we don't consider what the implications are of having the thought and just letting it go wild. And then it takes us to a picture of milk, or as you said, Marnie, it takes you to this memory. And it's sort of a benign example, but when we do this with more potent negative thoughts, it's not so benign a lot of the times.
So I have a question. Where ACT meets trauma work, like is diffusion something you could take to a client who's trying to lessen the power of a thought that's a memory from trauma, or attached? I feel I guess my question is more about the neural pathways in our brain. And when you've carved one so deep because of trauma, is it possible to use any of these exercises, like the diffusion exercise, to lessen that neural pathway? Or is that would we want to work with the client doing something else first before we got to ACT?
Such a great question. I think I shared, but prior in this class, in my experience, sometimes ACT falls flat, because especially with people who are, have intense, PTSD, because it can, if it's not done skillfully, it can be experienced as invalidating. Like, oh, your memory is it's just a memory. It's just a thought. Why can't you just get over it? I think a lot of times that's how people experience it. If it's done unskillfully. Yeah. But I think the idea here, even this exercise could be helpful with a client. It's going to vary probably, but a client could notice that, oh, this memory that I keep having, at some level, it is just a memory. It is just a thought. But I think you're wise to think about other, preparation beforehand. And I think that's where, and even if, we think about the Hexaflex, that, helping people get in touch maybe with mindfulness a bit through breathing practices. That alone, can be so powerful at helping, just even having one point to stand on so to speak, to see that thoughts are not actually all there is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just have to leave in a couple minutes to go pick up my kid, but yeah, I
Cool.
appreciated this little dive into ACT because I do really like it and want to use it. So
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
mhm.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's move along the hexaflex. And I'm going to just go back to it. Let's see, I'll share my screen again. So we were just working with diffusion itself as concept, as context. Let's do one that's here at acceptance. And the one I want to lead is called Understanding the Car. And I will just jump right in. So again, feel free to make yourself comfortable. And this is another visualization, as many of these are. And I want you to think about driving in a car. Cars are these days like large moving computers with big and small computer chips that control everything from temperature to the brake system, etc. Now, most of us don't really understand how those computer chips work, unless you happen to be a coder, someone who makes chips. And most of us don't know all the intricate details of how, of how they work. And I want you to just think about when next time you get in your car, or you're about to get in your car, are you going to stand next to your car until you understand how it works? Or will you accept that it works and get into it and drive yourself wherever you need to go? If your goal is to go where you need to go, how will understanding the computer chip in the car help you get there? And that's the metaphor. So feel free to open your eyes again. And really, this metaphor is especially useful for those who are really attached to intellectual understanding and wanting to know perhaps the intellectual solution to a problem. And yeah, bye, Marnie. I have like a tag team here because someone else is joining, I think. Hey there.
Am I the only one on?
No, there's three of you now.
Oh, hello.
How are you?
Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. You can listen to the rest later.
Thank you.
We were just doing some ACT metaphors, some visualizations and whatnot. The one that I just led, you missed it, Kathy, but it was using the metaphor of a car computer. It really reminded me of a traditional Buddhist metaphor that maybe you all are familiar with. I think the Buddha even used this in a sutra. If imagine somebody who's very ill, going to the doctor. The doctor prescribes medicine, and the patient, are you going to ask as the patient, how does this medicine work at a physiological and biological and chemical level? And, what are the ingredients of the medicine? And, how did it get to your clinic? Who made it? You know, all these other questions. And quite obviously, no, we're not really going to do that. We're going to take the medicine. But in some way, I think the Buddha was pointing out with this, people who were questioning his technique. He's like, you know, why don't you try it first and see if it works for you. Any thoughts, Suzanne or Hadass, on the understanding the car metaphor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice for me. I like metaphors in general. I'm just, for this one in particular, it feels like more like, I don't know how to explain this, like for someone, like to help someone get, I'm not sure what the use is. Like, would it be to help a client see like, oh, there's so many parts to being you, and that's what we're going to explore in therapy kind of thing? Or when would the intervention be appropriate?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I was just thinking about it. I think it would be appropriate as perhaps as a pivot as you're moving towards this right-hand side of the hexaflex, with, okay, like, yeah, you tend to be pretty neurotically focused perhaps on, you know, this sort of thing and like why this happens. But maybe there's one committed action that you could think about taking that can help you move towards your values. And rather than get caught up in understanding the computer in the car, you know, what's one thing that you could do which would correspond to like opening the door and sitting in the driver's seat and putting the key in the ignition? Maybe it's like, I'm going to sign up for a yoga class, or I'm going to, you know, pick up a pen and write a few sentences of a letter or of a book I want to write, you know.
It also kind of reminds me of the elephant, where it's like, oh, all these people are looking at the elephant, then not looking at the whole elephant. That's also what reminds me of the same. I'm not sure if they both elicit the same, or if ACT even uses that metaphor. It's so popular.
Can you say more, Suzanne, about how you're
I can't remember. I can't deliver it exceptionally, but it's like,
Yeah.
you know, you're staring, you know, many people are staring at an elephant very closely to the point where they're not seeing the whole elephant. They're just seeing what's in front of them. So
Right.
someone's at the ear, someone's feeling, you know,
Yes.
and then backing up, you can see what you're looking at is a huge thing.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I think that's another great metaphor. I think I certainly heard that in the Buddhist context, and it's another, I wonder, would you place that under the acceptance side, or would it be diffusion? I guess it could.
I think diffusion, I think either or. For me, it feels like diffusion because it feels like widening, like a widening of perspective, which would mean you'd have to diffuse what you're looking at so closely.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much overlap with these. Cool. So let's do. So there are some of these some of these exercises in this book are really focused more on the present moment awareness. So again, just sharing the screen again, contact with the present moment. I think here in Europa, this is something we do every class, right? And you guys all have, you know, meditation days coming up on Monday. So I'm not going to necessarily lead one in that. In fact, I did at the beginning when we meditated together. And similarly, I think, so I did a self-context. So we've actually done one of each of the acceptance and mindfulness ones at this point. So let's do one of the values or committed action ones, and let's see what I got here. Well, actually, one that was another famous one, since I'm naming the famous ACT metaphors, is imagine a speaker at your own funeral. And I think somebody mentioned, I listened to Barbara's, you know, recorded peer conversation, and someone mentioned that they had been familiar with this exercise. Maybe it was a different name, like giving your own speech at your funeral. But I love this exercise because it can be so powerful at connecting people with what are actually their best qualities, and that they already live. And it's just to imagine you're at your own funeral, which is kind of a bizarre thing to imagine. but imagine what is being said about you. And, you know, and this is something that I've had people do in a group setting where they, and this it's super helpful to do it in a group because you can have people take some time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and write out just some thoughts of what they would, and it could be even framed as what would you like people to say about you? I'd like people to say, I was a good husband. I was a good father. And I really, you know, I was attentive to my students, etc. You know, and in doing that, you can help people come face to face with, oh, these are my values, you know, that maybe I forget about this. Yeah, it's a powerful one. So that's one values one, and I wasn't going to lead that just because as I said, it sounds like people have done that recently. But let's do this one. This is called the heroes. And this is just a simple one. Just take a moment to yourself and think about people in your life that you might consider heroes or people that are role models for you. People who have played a direct role in your life, family members, friends, teachers, coaches, maybe teammates, maybe therapists or mentors or teachers of spirituality. And then perhaps even think about people that have inspired you more indirectly, like authors that you really resonate with, or artists, or even maybe fictional characters that you really resonate with. And out of all these people that have come to mind, think about one person who you really admire. And it's really about not their circumstances of their life, but really their personal qualities. And it might be a short list of, I admire their quality of courage or selflessness or something else. And just take a minute and at least think of one or two qualities. And when you have that short list, you can open your eyes. And yeah, I want to invite, what happened for you in this? What did you come up with?
I mean, for me, what was nice about this exercise is just focusing on like empowering or empowerment, like people who I want to orient towards, as opposed to negative thinking,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I tend to go.
Mm.
So felt really empowering and powerful in a short time. 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes.
Right. That's great. Yeah. And can you say, Suzanne, what qualities you came to mind?
Yeah, adventure, self-resilience, interdependence,
Yeah.
courageousness.
Awesome. Beautiful. And then this, just to use this as an example, this could be used with a patient or a client who maybe has trouble, like, oh, I don't know what my values are. You could ask them you could lead them through this. And then and I might even ask you right now, how might that list that you just, stated, how might it translate into your own values? Do any of those resonate with you as values that you have?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Awesome.
So then it would be like, you could ask the client, like, how could we implement that? Or could you move to committed actions at that point?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the idea, is like, because ACT is really a behavioral therapy where they, but even, probably any good therapy is going to help people take action.
Mhm.
But that's really a big part of it is, yeah, helping people free up energy through the diffusion and the acceptance of the present moment of what's going on, so that they can, just accept what's going on and still take the action. And then let's do one. That's the last one. So this is like a speed dating version of ACT. But we're going to do the last one, which is a committed action. So this is as you probably guessed, another guided imagery. And let's just jump right in because we just have a few minutes. So I'd like you to imagine that you're on a journey. The destination is somewhere really special, a place you really want to go. And you really wanted to go there for a long time. So you're super excited. You're going by train and you arrive at the train station. And both of the trains that you see are showing signs for your destination. One of the trains is odd looking and strange. Some of the seats look hard and they look uncomfortable. And overall, it looks kind of dirty. The train on the other platform is quite different. It looks familiar, safe, and reliable. It has air conditioning. It has even an in-train cinema, a fancy dining car with all-you-can-eat French cuisine that's free of charge for passengers. And you think to yourself, wow, I should really get on that train. I couldn't possibly make the journey on the other train. So you wait to board the wonderful train, and it hasn't opened the doors yet. And while you're on the seat in the train station, you notice that the odd-looking train starts to leave the station. You keep waiting for the safe, comfortable train to open its doors. And in the meanwhile, another odd, dilapidated train comes into the station, collects its passengers and leaves. And then another one, and then another one. All the while you're waiting for a chance to board this beautiful, reliable train. But here's the thing. What if the safe train won't ever leave the station? What if you're waiting for the wrong train? And so that's the metaphor. So feel free to open your eyes. And I want to just ask you now, just think to yourself and maybe answer, how does waiting for that good, beautiful train work in actually moving you towards your goals and your values?
I mean, it kind of seems like it's debilitating if you sit and wait for the safe train because it never opened its doors and the other trains were coming and going.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah. So thanks for responding, Kathy. It's a pretty simple idea, but it can be a profound one that, yeah, obviously you're missing the boat, so to speak, you're literally missing the train because you're waiting. And really the idea of this metaphor is to just focus in on if we can let negative internal experience, as an ACT in one of the readings, they called it private experience. If we can let that, if we say, I can't move forward while I'm having this negative private experience, then you're probably going to be waiting for a long time before you start to take action. One metaphor that I use sometimes, in fact, I just used it in a session this morning, probably because I was thinking a lot about ACT, is just to imagine you have two dials on, like, the old school dials that we all used to use before everything got digital, like a 0 to 10 volume dial. And one of the dials is pain on 0 and 10 is pleasure. And so, and the other dial is committed action towards your values. And there is a very similar idea here that we want oftentimes to turn the dial of pain and pleasure towards pleasure because we want to experience pleasure. But unfortunately, for pretty much all of us, that dial doesn't work. Or it's maybe locked behind a plastic box with a key, a lock that we don't have the key to. We do, however, have access to the other dial, which is, no matter what's going on internally, can you turn up that dial of action towards your values? What do you guys think of that one?
It seems like it'd be fun to do, like even the other one we did would be fun to do in group therapy, like with so to hear what other people say, and it'd be interesting to
Yeah.
hear the feedback or other people's experiences and relate them to how I feel.
Uh-huh. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of this ACT stuff does really well in group, because you can harness the power of the group of, somebody might share something that really is powerful, is poignant, and really can resonate. So we made it all the way around the Hexaflex, and I'm aware I actually have a meeting coming up in just a couple minutes. So just want to see, is there anything else on your all's mind that we should speak about? Cool. All right. Well, I really appreciate you being here, and those of you watching at home, I appreciate you too for watching. And let's do one more bow. All right. I hope you all take care. And again, community practice day is Monday. If you're able to attend any of those, I strongly encourage it. One of the awesome things about Naropa is things like that. But I will see you all in the future. Take care.